Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of Striper Migration Reports from On the Water magazine. I'm Matt Haeffner, the assistant editor here at On the Water. Now, a lot has happened this past week throughout the Striper coast, but we're going to kick things off like we always do down in the Chesapeake Bay region. Trophy striped bass season ended inside the Chesapeake Bay as of May 15th, so any of those 35 plus inch fish are going to have to be returned to the water immediately for release. And even though trophy striped bass season has ended, that doesn't mean that striper fishing is over in the Chesapeake Bay. However, if you are choosing to fish inside the bay, make sure that you know the regulations for your area. Different parts of the bay and different rivers will have different regulations. It's very complicated, so check out the regulations in your area before hitting the water this weekend. Now, in the upper Chesapeake Bay, a lot of anglers are fishing the rivers, finding success around the Conowingo Dam down to the Susquehanna Flats in particular. Small paddle tails and topwater spooks are getting it done. And most of those fish are going to fall in that slot size up in the upper Chesapeake Bay from 19 to 26 inches. And as of June 1st, that will change from 19 to 31 inches. But for now, 26-inch fish is going to be the top of the limit. In the lower Chesapeake Bay and the middle bay area, bigger is better this time of year. Anglers are finding the most success by jigging large paddle-tail swim baits, swim shads, and jigging with flutter spoons around the shipping channel edges. For the anglers that aren't jigging though, trolling is a great option. Umbrella rigs, mojos, and even trolling large spoons around those shipping channel edges is going to be a great option. And to be more particular, jigging paddle tails around heavy structure like those bay bridge pilings has been responsible for a lot of fish in the 25 to 40 inch range. And there are still plenty of large fish leaving the bay. Those Atlantic coast beaches in Maryland have been responsible for some fish up to 46 inches this week. Anglers are having success on everything from bloodworms, chunked bunker, paddle tails, and topwater lures. The only issue with fishing bait this time of year is you're going to start to see a lot of those inshore sharks and cow-nose rays messing with your baits. Now, as those bass from the Chesapeake Bay continue to push up the coast, southern New Jersey has had some great beach fishing this past week. There are 40-plus inch fish patrolling the beaches, especially at night and during those low light hours at dusk and dawn. Those fish are nosing around in the wash, picking up everything from sand fleas, aka sand bugs, to bunker chunks and clam bellies. For anglers fishing with artificial lures, targeting jetties around the inlets is going to be a number one location, especially this weekend with the new moon coming. Those strong tides are going to move around a lot of baits, so throwing things like minnow plugs and shallow surface swimmers is going to be a great option, especially with all that big bait moving around. In the backwaters of Barnegat Bay, the best fishing is going to be at night around those bridges. Jigging paddle-tail swim baits or live lining spot that tend to congregate around those bridges are going to be the best two options for anglers inside the bay. And a little further up the coast, anglers in northern Jersey are finding excellent fishing around bunker schools this week. For the boat crowd, live lining bunker is going to be a number one technique. Meanwhile, anglers on the beaches are having success casting metal-lipped swimmers and large wooden plugs to mimic those bunker. It almost seems like there's no end in sight for the trophy striper fishing that's going on around Raritan Bay. There are still fish in the 50-plus pound range being landed on around bunker schools. And when those large metal-lipped swimmers aren't getting it done, jigging with large paddle-tail swim baits or flutter spoons has been the next best option. And much like southern New Jersey, as those water temperatures continue to climb inside the bay, the fishing on the beaches is just going to heat up even more, although you might have to change your tactics up a bit. Already we've gotten reports from John Oswald. He's our Northern New Jersey Fishing Report author, and he and two-pole Mike Campoli, who is a well-known figure on the beaches down around northern New Jersey, have been using sand fleas, aka sand bugs, to target stripers in the wash this week. If you want to learn more about how to catch striped bass on sand fleas, check out the article at onthewater.com. And that bunker bite that is fueling the striped bass fishing across most of northern New Jersey will continue on into western Long Island around Jamaica Bay in particular. As some of those larger striped bass begin to exit the Hudson River, they're making a left turn either immediately and going up the East River, heading for the western Long Island Sound, where there are also some big bunker schools reported this week, or they're heading just a little further south and then hanging a left towards Jamaica Bay and the beaches of Long Island's South Shore. Now, while chunking bunker is a great option for surf casters on the beach around Rockaway, inside of Jamaica Bay, there's been a massive school of bunker that has stayed completely stationary over the past couple weeks. Captain Adrian Moeller of Rockfish Charters actually reported that the fishing has been so easy they're accidentally netting bass when they're cast netting for bunker. Now, obviously, all those bass have to be released, but it makes the fishing that simple. You find a school of bunker, you cast net a whole school, and whatever remains in the water, you live line the bunker right around them, let that bunker swim to the bottom of the school, and just wait for that unmistakable thud. Inside the back bays of Long Island, a little bit further east, anglers have reported success by clam chumming early in the morning or late in the afternoon around dusk. But much like the fishing in New Jersey, as those back bays on Long Island warm up, the fishing is going to improve along the beaches. However, there have also been schools of bunker pushing into the back bays around Great South Bay in particular. The only issue is it's mostly big bluefish following those schools of bunker, as the water in the back bays is starting to heat up a little bit too much for striped bass during the middle of the day. If you do find yourself targeting striped bass during the middle of the day, however, try rigging some sand fleas on a circle hook on the open beach, cast it right out, let it sit in the wash, and just wait for that thud. And with all that bunker around, the beaches are fishing pretty well at night. Anglers throwing Joe bag swarters, minnow plugs like SP minnows, and glide baits that perfectly imitate that wide S pattern of a bunker swimming have been the top producers on the open beaches this week. Pushing further east towards Montauk, the nighttime surf casting bite has been spectacular. With everything from bunker, spearing, herring, and even some squid around, anglers have a lot to choose from when they're pulling lures out of their plug bag at night. And because it's predominantly a big bait bite, throwing large swimming plugs, bucktails, and darters have been responsible for pulling in some of the bigger bass around Montauk Point this week. On Long Island's opposite shore and Long Island Sound, larger fish are staging in those deep rips and feeding on any bait that passes by on the incoming and outgoing tides. And surf casters will find the most success by targeting boulder fields with large swimming plugs, bucktails, and weedless soft plastics being crawled through those boulder fields like an eel. In other parts of the Long Island Sound, large schools of bunker and even peanut bunker are fueling blitzes in open water and in some of the harbors and marinas during the nighttime hours. Fish to 40 pounds have been reported in the Western Sound, as well as in some of those herring-run rivers on the Connecticut side of the Long Island Sound. Meanwhile, Connecticut's sound-facing beaches are flooded with schoolies and slot-sized striped bass this week. And again, because of all the large bait present, particularly bunker and herring, large topwater spooks are working like a charm, especially around dusk and dawn. In Rhode Island, Narragansett Bay has seen some spectacular fishing for 40-plus pound stripers this week, with the number one tactic being jigging flutter spoons through the water column. That's mostly due to a large congregation of bunker in the area. However, there's still a good amount of squid inside Narragansett Bay, too. Meanwhile, surf casters fishing from the rocks are finding the most success on large metal-lipped swimmers and topwater spooks like the Dock and the Game On X Walk. And that trend of big bass hammering bunker schools will continue to the western shores of Buzzards Bay outside of Rhode Island. Now, unfortunately, fishing topwater spooks like the Dock around a lot of these bunker schools will yield some big bluefish as well, some of them up to 17 pounds. But right beneath those bunker schools, you'll often find some bass in the 20 to 35 pound class range this week. And much like inside Narragansett Bay, flutter spoons have become a very popular option for anglers in the Buzzards Bay area. With all these fish stacked up in Buzzards Bay and the way that the canal has been fishing for the past week and a half or so, it's highly likely that that great fishing will continue through the new moon tides this weekend. And while striper fishing has been pretty much spectacular in Buzzards Bay, anglers on the south side of Cape Cod are having a little bit more difficulty, especially if they're fishing from shore. An unfortunate fish kill happened on the tail end of a cinder worm hatch in Falmouth salt ponds this past week. These fish literally ate so many cinder worms that they ate themselves to death. However, out front, boat fishermen will find that there's great fishing in deeper water throughout the Nantucket and Vineyard Sounds. Stripers in the 30 to 40 inch range are chasing squid, bunker, and herring towards those outer Cape beaches. Meanwhile, inside Cape Cod Bay, there's some good fishing around mackerel schools, with fly anglers reporting fish up to 30 pounds. A little bit north of Cape Cod, anglers on the south shore of Massachusetts are reporting big bunker schools pressed up along the shorelines at night, especially after those sustained southwest winds we've had this past week. And big metal lip swimmers and darters have been responsible for some of those bigger catches. And just a little further north than that, anglers around Boston are finding great fishing around mackerel schools as well, with 20 to 30 pound stripers taking mackerel as anglers are jigging them up with their sabiki rigs. It's safe to say that during this time of year, a great thing to have in your bag are some mackerel-colored minnow plugs and topwaters. And that mackerel bite continues all the way up to the Merrimack River. Meanwhile, some of the rivers around Boston actually saw blitzing fish way up inside the rivers this week. The Charles and Neponset rivers in particular saw some stellar topwater feeds with slot stripers blitzing on spearing this past week. For surf casters on the north shore of Massachusetts, the fishing has been spectacular this week, particularly on topwater spooks, poppers, and eel imitators. And finally, striped bass fishing in New Hampshire and Maine has taken off this week, particularly in the rivers. And it sounds like it's a really hot topwater bite. The Dock has been responsible for catching fish from slot size all the way up to 25 pounds. And when the fish aren't biting on top, the classic white paddle tails are getting it done, most likely because they're imitating a lot of the herring that are still running up and down those rivers. Up in Maine, the action is much of the same in some of those herring-choked rivers where white topwater spooks and paddle tails are getting it done. The herring run coast-wide seems to be much better this year than it was last year, and as a result, there have been some surprisingly large catches in the rivers around Maine this week. It is so great to see this much activity this time of year in northern New England, and it's safe to say that with the new moon tides happening tonight, Friday, that a majority of the coast is going to be seeing some big fish movement this weekend. Look for stripers to be stacked up in hot spots like inlets, deep rips over heavy structure, river mouths, and wind-blown shorelines where struggling schools of baitfish will be piled up. I hope you all enjoy the week of fishing ahead. Fish hard around those new moon tides this weekend. And if you haven't done so already, sign up for Striper Cup, where you have a chance at winning awesome weekly prizes from some of our sponsors just for catching and releasing striped bass. And that's all the time we have for this week, but check back again next week for another striper migration report with On the Water.